The Gemara tells us in Brachos that initially, after the Chet Egel, when Moshe was still in heaven, Hashem says to Moshe, I will destroy him if you allow me. If you will allow me. I mean, so immediately there's an inference. If Hashem wants to destroy them, how does Moshe have any relevance to the whole discussion over here? What do you mean, if you allow me? So Moshe Rabbeinu understood it meant that I have the ability to intervene, and if I intervene and supplicate Hashem for Rachamim, I'll be able to stay the execution. It's only because Hashem says, allow me. If you will allow me, he understood that's why he had permission to begin being mispaler. Only for that reason. Otherwise, if Hashem says, I will destroy them, you have no right to intervene whatsoever. It's the fait accompli, it's over. But it's only because there was an indication from Hashem that Moshe had a right and there was an opening for Rachamim, therefore he prayed, that's the word brachos, because Hashem said, Hani chosi, allow me. But otherwise not. Rabbeinu Bachya writes, people say that Noach, when he was told by Hashem that he will destroy the world with the Mabul, with the great flood, why didn't he pray? Moshe Rabbeinu prayed when he heard that Klal Yisrael were going to be destroyed. So why didn't Noach pray? Noach was tzaddik b'dorosov. So Rabbeinu Bachya answers that because Hashem says he will destroy them, and there was no indication that he had a right to petition their case, to intervene. Therefore, it was a fait accompli. I will destroy the world. Noach had no right to open his mouth to say a word. However, by Moshe Rabbeinu, because he said, allow me, therefore that was the indicator that Moshe had a right to supplicate. That's Rabbeinu Bachya. We find by Sodom that Hashem says to Avram Avinu, I will destroy Sodom. And immediately, Avram enters into a dialogue. If there are 50 tzaddikim, there are 45 tzaddikim, until Hashem says there are no tzaddikim, and I will destroy them all. I mean, if Hashem says to Avram, I will destroy them, where does Avram have a right, again, to petition based on this? So I once said that what went through Avram's mind, Hashem, if you want to destroy them, what do you have to inform me? Why are you sharing this piece of information with me? Just destroy them. Evidently, I have something to say about it, because otherwise you wouldn't inform me. So that was Avram's opening to consider that there's a chance he's able to save these 5 communities, which were still in Amorah. Again, only because he had that opening, because the question he had was the answer. Why are you sharing it with me? Evidently, it has relevance to me. What's relevance? That I could petition a case. Maybe there's so many tzaddikim. Hashem says no. So what was the whole idea? It was Avraham Avinu should actually go through this exercise to show that even though they were the antithesis to what he represented, nevertheless, Avraham Avinu was able to rise above the fray and petition that case. But the bottom line was, there's no chance. There's no tzaddikim, they will be destroyed. So you have to have an opening to be able to to petition whatever the issue may be. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you will not go into the land. And Hashem took an oath. And a gzeira that's accompanied with a shua, it cannot be nullified. Can nullify it. So the question is, if Hashem already said to Moshe, you're not going in, where does Moshe Rabbeinu have a right to begin being mispalim? And he used every term, every avenue for Rachamim to petition Hashem. He used it. This is Veschanan Hashem, as we'll see Rashi in a moment. The 10 expressions of tefillah, and Moshe Rabbeinu used every expression to try to overturn this. I mean, if Hashem already said the decree is, your fate is sealed, where do you have a right to petition? Okay? So we'll see in a moment. So Rashi cites Chazal. What was the basis? So you take a look in Rashi, Beisahi, the second Rashi. After Moshe conquered the Transjordan side, the territory of Sichon and Og, the Nisi Shem Huter Neder. I thought that maybe the Neder, the Shua, the Gzeira, the decree that was made by Hashem was partially nullified. And because it was nullified, therefore I have a right to pray. So that was the indicator. If he wouldn't have had any indication, because factually the Transjordan side is part of Eretz Yisrael. So if it's part of Eretz Yisrael, Hashem allowed me to go this far. Maybe that's the indication it's partially nullified. That's the opening that there's a basis for Rachamim. But if not, if he wouldn't have any indicator that the decree has no relevance to him, still has relevance to him, he wouldn't pray. So again, that he says, that was the basis. Otherwise, Moshe Rabbeinu also couldn't pray. Wasn't permitted to pray. I mean, factually, Hashem says, I don't want to hear about it. But I thought of something else. As we're talking, the Gemara tells us in Brochus that Chizkiyo Melech Yehuda, he was on his deathbed, and Yeshaya Novi comes to him and says to him, Chizkiyo, you will not come out of the sickbed, you will die. Why? Because he didn't procreate. He did procreate. So Chizkiyo says to Yeshaya Novi, how do you expect me to procreate? I see through my divine vision that I'm going to have a son who's going to be so evil, one of the most evil kings, Menashe. Menashe was the son of Chizkiyo Melech. Chizkiyo was a tzaddik. He's the one who reestablished Torah. He was the one that his father was an evil man, and he had taken a Sefer Torah and a sword, and he gathered all the Jewish people and said to them, either you live by the Torah, you can be pierced by the sword. Within 2.5 years, all women and children from one location to another, they were proficient in the laws of spiritual purity. And yet he was going to have a son who was evil, who was literally going to take down Klal Yisrael in terms of idolatry. So he says to Yeshaya, Hanovi, how do you expect me to procreate if I see through my divine vision I have this kind of son? So Yeshaya Novi says to Chizkiyo Melech, don't get involved with God's hidden secrets. That's God's business. You have an obligation to procreate. What that child will be, that's up to God. That child has Bechiras, free choice, if he chooses that, but in terms of your obligation, that is your obligation. But Yeshaya says to Chizkiyo, but you realize, because he didn't procreate, you will die. So he says, Yeshaya's name was Yeshai ben Amotz, the son of Amotz. He says, Ben Amotz, doesn't refer to Yeshaya, he says, get out. Why should he get out? He got upset. He says, I have a Kabbalah Beis Ovi from David HaMelech. Afil cherev munachas al tzavoroch. Even if you have a sword on your neck, al tishayish bin arachmim. If you have a sword on your neck, you should not despair from rachmim. Therefore, get out. So don't tell me it's over. There's still a place for tefillah. I still could pray, even though you're telling me it's a nevuah that I'm going to die. Get out, because I'll yesh Kabbalah Beis Ovi. I have a Kabbalah. I have a tradition from my father's household, from David HaMelech. Afilu cherev nachas al tzavoro. Even if you have a sword on your neck, al yishayish min arachmim. So it could be, as over there, when it's something which is personal, relating to you personally, even if you have no indicator, you have a right to pray for your life. That's your personal life. As a result of this is Moshe dying. Even if Moshe wouldn't have had any indication, if this is the last chance, he's going to die. This is that's when Moshe had a right. We'd have to come on to say that because he saw that he conquered part of Eretz Yisrael, because this became part of the Nachlo, because the 2.5 tribes were there. That was the indicator. That was the opening for him to pray. I'm saying maybe you don't have to come on. You can say what we say now. As Chizkiyo Melech Yehuda, although Shai came as a Novi to tell him this, but it's something on that such a personal level. You have a right not to leave a stone unturned, and you pray for Rachamim. That's what I was thinking. Question again. Go ahead. Ask your question. Ernie, go ahead.
That because there's always an opportunity to do tshuva. If Hashem just does something, then there's obviously no opportunity. But if Hashem says this is what's going to happen, then of course there's an opportunity to tshuva.
Firstly, Hashem says it's a fait complete, and not only he took the shua, God, it's a decree with an oath. How do you overturn that? So Rashi explains, because since he saw it was partially annulled, because he was able to what? To conquer. He already conquered part of Eretz Yisrael, because this became a portion that was given to some of the Shvatim, the tribes. Therefore, he thought that's Rashi. I'm saying something else. I'm saying that if Hashem says it's over, it's over. It's over. If a person knows he's deathly ill, doesn't mean you're going to die. Doesn't mean you're going to die. If you do tshuva, maybe you could recover. Even if the statistic is nobody's ever survived, doesn't make a difference. Al yishash min harachim. You don't despair. But here God says you will die. This is a direct decree of Hashem. You will die. It's like over there by the Mabul. Moshe Rabbeinu only had a right to pray for Klal Yisrael only because there was an opening, the Gemara says. He says, allow me to destroy it. If not for that, he had no right to pray. And that's why Noach, since he had no indication that he had a right to pray, he kept silent. And that's why they were destroyed. So I'm saying so. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu had a reason. How do you have a right? If Hashem says it's a fait accompli, you're dying, you're not going in, where does he have a right to begin praying? So with Rashi, with the Chazal, it's very good. Because he had an opening. There's like by Sodom, that since Hashem is sharing the information with Avram, he thought that was an opening that he had a right to petition that case. Here, he thought that since it was a partial conquest, that was an indication he had a right. There was an opening for Rachamim, because he went that far. I'm saying that when it's on a personal level, because here it's his life. It's not praying on behalf of Klal Yisrael, praying on behalf of the world, praying on behalf of Sodom. This is his life is going to end. When it's a question of your life, even if you have no indicator, you don't need an indicator. You have a right to pray. You have a right to pray. Like the story with Chizkiyahu, Melech Yehuda, with Yeshaya Navi, when he said you're going to die, and he says, it's over. He's told him, I disagree. I have a Kabbalah when it comes to your personal situation, even if you have the sword on your neck, al yishash min harachmim. Okay? But what I said with Rashi, it's better. Why is it better? Okay, then I'm going to differentiate. Rashi, there was a decree with an oath, you're not going in. There it said, you're not going in. Just because there's a sword on your neck, it doesn't mean that sword will decapitate you. Doesn't mean that. There's a chance it may not. There's still a chance of Rachamim. If Hashem says it's over, and he took an oath that you're not going in, how do you even have the chutzpah after the Hashem has decided you're not going in? How do you even begin petitioning? The answer is that he thought that the decree was already annulled, that since he saw Hashem allowed him to go this far, that part of the conquest already has begun and he's there, maybe that's an indicator that what? So here the Sifsei Chacham asks a question, if that's the case, what does he have to pray? If the decree was annulled, he doesn't have to pray. So what are the Vaschana? So he explains that originally the decree was with an oath. A decree with an oath is not nullifiable. But since he saw it was partially nullified, but it's still in place, Tefillah now may overturn it totally. That's how the Sifsei Chacham explains this over here. Originally, it was a gzeira with a shvua. A gzeira, a decree with an oath, cannot be overturned. But since now he sees that Hashem allowed him to go this far, it's partially nullified. Partially nullified, but it's still in place. Therefore, now there's a chance with tefillah, he'll be able to overturn it. That's how the Sifsei Chacham explains this whole discussion. What is gracious? What is mercy? Mercy is, there's a reason you're worthy that I should be merciful. We have certain merit. You have a good standing. This hope. That's Rachamim. Chanun, graciousness, means matnas chinam. It's gratis. It's unrelated to the person. It's the benefactor is being gracious. Although the recipient has no necessary worthiness, that the benefactor should be gracious. That's what it's referred to as matnas chinam. When Moshe prayed now, he didn't pray that he has any merit. Not merit whatsoever, could you imagine? Moshe Rabbeinu, if not for him taking the Jews out of Egypt, they wouldn't have gone out of Egypt. If not for Moshe Rabbeinu being who he was, no one else was qualified to receive the Torah. All the Kiddush Hashem, that Egypt was destroyed, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. No one else could have brought about what Moshe Rabbeinu brought about. And Moshe Rabbeinu became Moshe Rabbeinu because he had Bechira. He chose to be. He made many choices that he was qualified to be in the position that he was. So he'd say, I have sufficient merit that I could pray in the merit of my merit, you should overturn the decree. Yet Moshe Rabbeinu did not use the expression of Rachamim. When he prayed to Hashem, the expression used was Eschanan. He wants matnas chinam. He felt it's not dependent on my worthiness. Because there's no such thing. When you pray to God, we've overspent our credit line endless times over. We've exhausted it. Despite that, Hashem is still gracious. And the tzaddik, being the tzaddik, understands that he is a beneficiary and he's benefited beyond his deservingness. So what's the basis for a supplication? It's Hanan. In terms of who I am, I'm unworthy. Could you imagine? Moshe Rabbeinu. Well, if you Adam become Adam, you're the most humble person, you have a clear understanding that everything Hashem does for you, he's overturning worlds for you until now. And you don't say, what did you do for me lately? There's no such thing that Hashem, what did you do for me lately? If you have that level of clarity, there's no such thing. If that's the case, the expression, the term he used was Eschanan. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But it's not only Moshe Rabbeinu, it's tzaddikim. Whenever they pray to Hashem, they ask matnas chinam. It's based on God's graciousness. And where do we know God is gracious? That even though you have no worthiness, God sometimes intervenes and he will annul a decree, meaning he will silence prosecution. Whenever it says chinun, it's a gift that's given gratis. Although tzaddikim, they could attribute their worthiness to all their good deeds that they've done. That's what they're called tzaddikim. But when they supplicate Hashem, it's never connected that they're worthy of anything. Hashem had said to Moshe Rabbeinu when he supplicated the Jews on behalf of Klal Yisrael and Chet Egel, Hashem said, "V'chanosi es asherochom." I will be gracious to the one who I will be gracious to. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he prayed, the terminology used was eschanan. In terms of who I am, what I've accomplished, I've overextended my credit line. I'm unworthy, but I'm not asking because I'm worthy. I'm purely based on your chinun, on your matnas chinun, because Hashem's chesed is unlimited. Now, we find that why did Hashem create the world? If I work for you, you have to pay my wage because you owe it to me. Before existence existed, Hashem owed nothing to anyone. The world didn't exist. So why did Hashem create the world? So it's based on a pasuk in Tehillim that David Melech says, Olam chesed yiboneh. The reason why Hashem created the world was a chesed, purely chesed. What's chesed? It's indiscriminate kindness. So the Ramchal explains that Hashem being the source of goodness on the absolute level, goodness does good. He wanted to create a setting that man should be a beneficiary of the ultimate good. That's the chesed. Olam chesed yiboneh. That's why he created existence. So the whole concept of Chanina, of Madas Chinam, creation is Madas Chinam. Why did he create the world? There was no human being, there was no world. He created a setting to give man to have an opportunity to be worthy of this opportunity. That's chesed. Olam chesed yibadeh. And once said, we find that each one of the other Sakadoshim, they assumed one of Hashem's attributes. What's Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu was chesed. He's the Amur HaChesed. He's the pillar of loving kindness. When he hosted people, it was indiscriminate kindness. He didn't know they were pagans, idolaters, he hosted everyone. Why? Indiscriminate kindness. Because just as Hashem, when he created the world, there was no basis, because there was no world, but it was purely chesed, to give man the opportunity. Identically, Avram Avinu, he introduced God to existence because God was an unknown quantity at that moment. That's why he assumed that characteristic of chesed. Because just as Olam Chesed Yibaneh, the characteristic he's assuming is Olam Chesed Yibaneh. He's creating a world. He's introducing, giving this opportunity. That's why Avram Avinu was the Amur HaChesed. He chose that rather than the attribute of exactness, din, which was Yitzchok's attribute. But that's Chanosi Shesherochu. God says that you have a right to ask that at Sinai, that when you supplicate me, you have a right to petition me based on my graciousness. That even though you're unworthy, to say, Hashem, you yourself said that the times where you show you graciousness, I'm drawing on that graciousness. Manas chinam, I'm unworthy. We find that when Aaron was installed to be the Kohen Gadol, so initially he hesitated to do the avodah. Why? Because he was involved in the Chet Egel, and he felt he was unworthy. So Moshe says to Aaron, that's exactly why you're qualified. Because you feel unworthy, that's why you're qualified to be the Kohen Gadol. Meaning a person who has that level of humility, that nothing goes unnoticed, and you feel the unworthiness. And despite that, then you recognize that what you're being endowed with is purely a gift of Hashem. That qualifies you, that brings you over the top. To feel that God owes you nothing, and it's purely Chesed Hashem, it's Chanina, that gives you that level of worthiness. And that's what the tzaddikim, because they recognize and they appreciate whatever. You know, when we say Modim at the end of the Shemon Esrei, we thank Hashem for everything. Their miracles take place continuously. And who sees miracles? Some people see miracles continuously. They see God continuously intervening in their life. They have a success, right? Success. They never attribute it to themselves. It's amazing. Everything's continuously amazing. Why is it so amazing? You have this kind of education. You have this kind of relationship. You have a track record. That's why you're succeeding. Never. A tzaddik never sees it that way. Every time he has a success in his life or anything, there's a gift of Hashem. It's a gift. Everything's a gift. And he's always singing God's praises. I always say, one's yearly stipend is determined from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So we learned in the Mesillas Yesharim, so if it's already predestined what you're supposed to earn, what do you have to take any initiative? Just sit back and just wait for the check to come in the mail. So the Ramchal writes in the Mesillas Yesharim that when Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, of the tree of knowledge, the curse to Adam was to all mankind, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat. You shall eat bread. The decree was that the only way you're able to release your stipend, you have to meet the prerequisite. You have to toil. It's only by the sweat of your brow. Now, everybody has different degree of what's considered the sweat of your brow. A person who's a tzaddik, and he has to interrupt his Torah study to take any initiative, to earn the material. That's a seis hapecha toch alechem. Since he values every moment to be infinitely precious because he's able to generate mitzvahs, and he has to take out time from that to pursue the material, he's eating bread by the sweat of his brow, even to take for a minute, doing one action. I've told over the story with the Chofetz Chaim, the Panovich Rav, when he was 20 years old, his father was a Rav, and he was a friend of the Chofetz Chaim, and he was passing by Radin, and he figured he'll drop in to see the Chofetz Chaim. And when he passed by the Chofetz Chaim house, he heard somebody wailing and crying. And it touched him to a point. He felt ill from listening to the pain of this person. That's how he was crying. So he knocks on the door. He felt maybe he could do something. He didn't realize this was the Chofetz Chaim's house. And the Chofetz Chaim's wife answers the door. And he says to her, is this the house? She says, yes, this is the house. He says, I hear these sounds of a person crying to a degree. I feel consumed by the pain. What's going on? He says, there's a woman who has difficulty with childbirth, is in labor. She can't deliver. My husband's praying for that woman. So when he heard that, he says, I've never heard anything like it. If you pray for your own wife, your own daughter, we understand it. But to pray for a stranger with this level of pain, as if it's your own pain, that he's never experienced in his life. He was so touched by that, he decided he's staying in Radin. And he's going to become the student of the Chofetz Chaim. At that time, who was also a Talmud of Chofetz Chaim? Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. Chanan Wasserman was 16 years older than the Panovich Rav. However, the Chofetz Chaim made the shidduch between Rav Kahneman and Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, although he's 16, and they were chavrusas for 4 years. They learned the chavrusa partners and learning for 4 years. He set up this partnership of Chofetz Chaim. Okay, so they were studying. At one time, it was 2 a.m, and they came upon something which the Chofetz Chaim cites that Be'er Halacha, a certain sefer. And they figured if the Chofetz Chaim cites it, he probably has the sefer in his home, because they wanted to see it in its original, the source. They figured they'll go by the Chofetz Chaim's house to see if the lights are on. If the lights are on, they'll knock on the door gently, not to wake up the Rebbitzin, his wife. So they knock, they see the lights are on, they go in, the Chofetz Chaim admits them, and the Chofetz Chaim says to them, do you have some kind of difficulty, problem? Yes. You cite a certain sefer in your Deber Halacha, and we would like to borrow the sefer. He says, that sefer that I cited, I haven't seen that sefer for about 65 years. I borrowed it many years ago, and when I write to Chofetz Chaim, I write to Mr. Brewer and Be'er Halacha, most of it is from memory. From memory. The Chofetz Chaim had a photographic memory. And then he looks at his Svarim bookcase. It's a few boards knocked together with a few Svarim on the shelf. And as he looks at the Svarim, he groans. And he says, so they ask him, why are you groaning? He says, you don't understand. To buy Svarim, you need money. Money is time. I had to take out that time to earn the money to buy those books. I could have been studying. Therefore, it's painful that I take away from my Torah study to earn money, but I have no choice. That's the tzaddik. Every moment he takes away from his Torah study, that's zeis hapecha toch alechem. So the tzaddik, he's always meeting that criteria with a minimum amount of effort. That's pushing a boulder up a hill, up a mountain. Another person has all the time in the world. He spends 6 hours a day on the golf green. And he goes to whatever it is. He goes to the Turkish bath twice a week. And he goes bowling with his buddies. And he has all this time. Hashem says, you know something? For you, zeis hapecha is you have to become a workaholic. You don't see your kids till they graduate college. That's Eisapecha, because evidently you have a lot of time on your hand that you expend that time for other things. That's not Eisapecha Toch Alechem. So now, the tzaddik, he draws a stipend with a minimum amount of effort. He's studying day and night. Rabbi Shlomo Slant used to buy an Austrian sweepstake ticket. That was his ishtadlus. That was his initiative. That's all he did. And somehow things worked out throughout the year. Because for Rabbi Shlomo Slant, taking out that amount of money to buy that Austrian sweepstake ticket, that's all he didn't have to do more than that. Somebody else, because you don't value time to that degree, we talk about real time. You come home late. You're really going on that trip. You haven't eaten in 3 days. You're closing that deal. You're aggravating. Whatever it is. For the Chavetz Chaim, Eisapecha was a minimum amount of effort. So a tzaddik, everything he sees it's miraculous. I did nothing, and all of a sudden everything works out. Financially, thank God. What did I do? So when you go to the tzaddik and you ask him for tzedakah, charity, for him it's not a pound of flesh. Why? Because he sees it, whatever he has is a gift of God. Hashem gave it to him as a gift. The workaholic that his fortune cost him, and he believes he's a self-made man. It cost him his family. It cost him his wife. And when he takes off that week vacation, he has to invest that vacation in such a degree because he only has a week because he can't get away from work. For him, his fortune, his success is a pound of flesh. When you ask him for tzedakah, and you say, by the way, it's a gift of God. He says, gift of God? This success cost me a pound of flesh. I'll give charity the way I want to give charity. So it's a whole, each one sees it through a different lens. Because the way things come about, one, he sees it as a gift. The other one sees it as, no, this cost me my life. And therefore, I only give it where I want to give it. Nobody dictates and tells me how to live my life. Good. Mark, yes,
if everything is a gift from Hashem, why would anybody appeal to Hashem to his attribute of Rachamim as opposed to just graciousness? Because nobody really has any merit in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, good question. There's a ritva in Avodah Zarah, which we once had. It says, who enacted Tfilas Mincha? The Gemara says in Brachos, it says, Yitzchak went Lasuch Basode. This is right before he met Rivka. She was coming back with Eliezer. So the Gemara says, Ein Sicha El Loshen Tfilo. Sicha is an expression of prayer. From here we learn, Vayetze Yitzchak Lasuch Basode, he went Yitzchak Tikin Tfilas Mincha. He enacted Mincha. So Ritva says, what did he pray for? What did he pray for? He said he did not pray for himself. As a known fact, tzaddikim do not pray for themselves. They always pray for others. He prayed for the world. There should be peace. The world should have blessing. A tzaddik never prays for himself. Always prays for others. Okay? Now, initially when God created the world, the appellation for Hashem is Elokim, Rashis Bar Elokim, which is the attribute of what? Of din, justice. And then when he creates man, all of a sudden it's Hashem Elokim. Yudke Vavke is Rachmim. So Rashi cites Chazal immediately, the Medrash, that because God understood, since man is prone to fail, without Rachmim, the world cannot continue. You're not going to have many people surviving the system. Therefore, you coalesced into judgment is Rachmim. I'll give you another chance. You could do tshuva, and even if you don't do tshuva, I'll give you opportunity to do other mitzvahs that at least your record will be a more positive record. Because if he takes you out immediately, there's no future. Man has no chance to succeed at every level. Therefore, there's Rachmim. But yet the Gemara tells us in a few locations, HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktik im tzaddik of kuchot hasara. But regarding to a tzaddik's personal situation, he's exacting as much as a hairbreadth. As much as a hairbreadth. The rachmim that he offers the world, he does not offer the tzaddik. That slack, that leeway that he gives the world, he does not give to the tzaddik. Because since the tzaddik has a greater sensitivity and a clearer lens, therefore the tzaddik is closer to din. He doesn't get the rachamim that the world is accommodated with. When he prays for the world, he prays with for rachamim, because the world's lens is a blurred lens. As a result of that, they need rachamim. But the tzaddik, who has a level of clarity, even though it's not absolute clarity, there's greater level of culpability, and therefore the rachamim that is afforded to the world is not afforded to the tzaddik. The tzaddik himself doesn't ask rachamim for himself. Doesn't. He prays, as he says here, Man l'schinam, God be gracious to me. When the tzaddik prays for the world, who's he praying for? For people who don't have that level of understanding. They believe that what? They haven't exhausted. Because I put on tefillin today, I have a worthiness. Because I keep Shabbos, I have a worthiness. Because I eat kosher, I have a worthiness. That's the way the world sees it. But God has said, I paid you out 1,000 times over. But the world doesn't see it that way. Because they don't see it that way, therefore they need rachamim. But the tzaddik who does see it that way, that he exhausted his credit line endlessly times over, he won't have the audacity to say, Hashem, you're my debtor. There's no such thing. Chas v'shoma, God's anybody's debtor. That's the tzaddik for himself. But when he prays for others, he needs rachamim because they don't understand that. And they feel they did so much, therefore God at least should give him some slack or give him some leeway. So for others, there's rachamim. For the tzaddik, never rachamim for himself. If you as the shlump, and you feel that you're a shlump, okay? You're undeserving. And you feel that way, and you pray that you're undeserving, and you're asking God should be gracious to you, that gives you greater merit. Because even though you feel you're there when you're not, and you're not so-called the tzaddik, and you still feel this way, it's a tremendous level. But the average person feels that's not the case. You've done so much. You've done so much for the Jewish people. Don't you think God owes it to you? People speak this way. Don't you think God owes it to you? And people talk this way. In my background, I've heard people say, when people have their personal tragedies, they say, don't you think God owes you? You've done so much for people, for this and that. God owes you nothing. But you have to feel that God owes you nothing. If you say the words and you don't internalize those words, so you're speaking through two sides of your mouth. You feel he owes it to you, but yet you're saying you don't owe it to me. The person truly feels that he's a debtor to Hashem because he's exhausted every level of merit that God paid him out already. First, let's talk. A share in the world to come has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Hashem says, you do this, you get a share in the world to come. That God should intervene on your behalf and do something for you in this world, that's a whole different discussion. Hashem says, you put on tefillin, you have a share in the world to come. You keep Shabbos, you have a share to come. God never says, I owe you anything in this world. But of course, I have to accommodate you. We say, Ochel, it's Kerekems, Ochel per symbol mazeh, Kerekems l'lamabo, right? We said every day. The principle is held intact for the world to come. We eat the usufruct in this world. What does that mean? So the Meforshim explain that if a person is born where it's determined his destiny, you should have limited income. There's certain mitzvahs you do that they generate that to make things easier, but it's only to facilitate the mitzvah. Hashem gives you a little extra that since it should be less difficult. There's certain mitzvahs that generate that, but the keren, but the core, the principle, that's for the world to come. We'll speak about over here, changing the equation in this world. This world, we call it, there's the natural order. You want God should overturn the natural order because of Rachamim. Rachamim means, you have a worthiness. To some degree, I'm worthy of mercy. The tzaddik never feels he's worthy of mercy. It's always gratis. It's matas chinam. Because I understand whatever I've done, the world to come is a separate discussion, but that you owe it to me in this world, nothing in this world. Because I've depleted my account. There's nothing left. I overdrew my whatever it is, my limit on my card.